In September of 1752, something happened in Britain and its colonies that should be impossible. 11 days vanished, not metaphorically, not in the way we say time flies or the years blur together, literally. On the evening of Wednesday, September 2nd, 1752, people in London and Boston and Philadelphia and every territory governed by the British Crown went to sleep. When they woke up, it was Thursday, September 14th. September 3rd through September 13th did not exist. They were not skipped in conversation. They were not holidays or days of rest. They were deleted, removed from the calendar by an act of Parliament as if they had never been. 11 days of human life, of commerce, of birth and death and everything in between, legislated out of existence. And nobody talks about it, not nobody in the conspiratorial sense. Historians know about it. It appears in reference books. If you search for it specifically, you'll find it. But for an event that literally altered the fabric of recorded time for the entire English-speaking world, the Calendar Act of 1750, which took effect in 1752, occupies an almost comically small space in the public imagination. It's treated as a quirky footnote, a bureaucratic adjustment, the kind of thing that might appear in a trivia game, but never in a serious discussion about power, about who controls the structure of daily reality, about what it means when a government can delete time itself and call it correction. I found this while researching something else entirely, and the deeper I looked, the more the official explanation, the neat, rational, administrative explanation, began to dissolve into something far more unsettling than a calendar adjustment. Here's the official story. You've probably encountered some version of it. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII reformed the Julian calendar, the calendar that had governed European timekeeping since Julius Caesar introduced it in 46 BC. The Julian calendar was slightly inaccurate. It overestimated the length of the solar year by approximately 11 minutes. Over centuries, those 11 minutes accumulated. By the 1500s, the calendar had drifted 10 days out of alignment with the astronomical seasons. Easter, which was supposed to be calculated relative to the spring equinox, was migrating through the calendar year. The Pope's solution was elegant. Drop 10 days. Jump from October 4th directly to October 15th. Adjust the leap year rules to prevent future drift. Catholic Europe adopted the Gregorian calendar immediately. Protestant Europe refused. And here's where the story gets interesting. Protestant Europe refused not because the math was wrong. The math was undeniably correct. Protestant countries refused because the reform came from the Pope, from Rome, from the institution that the Protestant Reformation had spent the better part of a century defining itself against. To adopt the Gregorian calendar was to acknowledge papal authority over the most fundamental structure of daily life, the measurement of time itself. And for Protestant nations, particularly England, that was unacceptable, not mathematically, politically, theologically, existentially. So England kept the Julian calendar for 170 years. For nearly 2 centuries, England and its colonies operated on a different calendar than most of continental Europe. Dates didn't match. The English New Year began on March 25th, not January 1st. A letter written in London on February 10th, 1740, was dated differently than a letter written in Paris on the same day. International commerce required constant conversion. Diplomatic correspondence was a maze of dual dating. The practical inconvenience was enormous, and England endured it year after year, decade after decade, rather than accept a calendar that bore the stamp of Catholic authority. This raises a simple but critical question. If the resistance was theological, what changed in 1752 that made the theological objection suddenly irrelevant? The official answer is pragmatism. By the mid-1700s, the practical difficulties of maintaining a separate calendar had become intolerable. International trade demanded synchronization. The British Empire was expanding and administering colonies across the globe on a calendar that didn't match the rest of Europe was increasingly absurd. Parliament acted. The Calendar Act was passed. The Gregorian calendar was adopted. 11 days were dropped. Problem solved. But the official explanation collapses here, because pragmatism doesn't explain 170 years of refusal followed by sudden capitulation. If the practical problems were so severe, they were severe in 1600 as well, in 1650, in 1700. Every decade that England maintained the Julian calendar, the problems compounded. The drift grew, the inconvenience deepened, and yet, for 170 years, England chose theology over practicality, identity over efficiency, the symbolic refusal of Rome over the material benefits of synchronization. And then, in a single act, it reversed course. What changed wasn't the math. What changed was the power structure. The deeper I went, the more 1752 aligned with a broader transformation in who controlled the measurement of time in British society. The early to mid-1700s saw the rise of what we'd now call the commercial and financial establishment. The Bank of England, founded in 1694, had by the 1750s become the central nervous system of British economic life. International trade was no longer a sideline. It was the engine of the empire. The merchants, the bankers, the trading companies, these were the people for whom calendar misalignment wasn't a theological abstraction, but a daily operational nightmare. And these were the people whose influence over Parliament had grown to the point where they could force a change that theology had blocked for nearly 2 centuries. The Calendar Act of 1752 wasn't a triumph of reason over superstition. It was a triumph of commerce over religion. The moment the financial cost of maintaining the old calendar exceeded the theological cost of abandoning it, the calendar changed. Not because anyone stopped caring about the Pope, because someone started caring more about the ledger. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision, because the calendar change didn't just synchronize dates, it restructured the financial year. Before 1752, the English New Year began on March 25th, Lady Day, a date rooted in Christian tradition. After 1752, the New Year moved to January 1st, but the financial year, the tax year, didn't simply move with it. The Treasury, unwilling to lose 11 days of tax revenue, extended the financial year by 11 days. The British tax year to this day begins on April 6th, not January 1st, not any date with astronomical or theological significance. April 6th, a date that makes no sense unless you know that it's March 25th plus 11 deleted days plus 1 additional day added in 1800 to account for a leap year adjustment. The British tax year is a fossil, a mathematical artifact of a calendar deletion that happened 273 years ago. And every British taxpayer lives inside that artifact without knowing why, as if they were following instructions they didn't fully understand. Now, the 11 days themselves. Because this is where the human dimension of the story gets buried under the administrative one, and it shouldn't be buried, because what happened to people in September 1752 was not a minor adjustment. It was a rupture in the experience of lived time. The popular historical account tells us that riots broke out, that mobs took to the streets of London and Bristol shouting, "Give us our 11 days," that people believed, genuinely believed, that the government had stolen 11 days of their lives. The historical accuracy of these specific riots has been debated. Some scholars argue the riots were exaggerated or mythologized. Others argue they were real but limited. What is not debated is the widespread confusion, anger, and fear that the calendar change produced among ordinary people. And why wouldn't it? Consider what the deletion meant in practical terms. If you were a laborer paid by the day, you lost 11 days of wages in September 1752. If you were a tenant whose rent was due monthly, your September rent covered 20 instead of 30 days, but the amount didn't change. If you were a farmer whose planting and harvesting schedules were calibrated to dates, your entire agricultural calendar was disrupted. If you were a servant whose contract ran to a specific date, that date had suddenly moved. If you owed money due on September 10th, that date no longer existed. Did you owe it on the 14th? Did the interest accrue across days that never happened? The propertied classes, the classes that had pushed for the change, had accountants and lawyers to navigate the transition. The laboring classes had nothing. The 11 days were deleted from everyone's calendar equally, but the cost of the deletion fell entirely on those who could least afford it. The merchants gained synchronization with European trading partners. The workers lost wages. The landlords collected the same rent for fewer days. The tenants paid the same amount for less time. The mathematical elegance of the correction distributed its consequences with a precision that had nothing to do with mathematics and everything to do with power. The silence was deafening when I looked for scholarship on the economic impact of the calendar change on working people, because the scholarship barely exists. The Calendar Act of 1752 is studied as an administrative event, a technical correction, a moment in the history of timekeeping. It is not studied as an economic event, not as a moment when the government reached into the lives of millions of people and restructured their financial reality by deleting time. The 11 days are treated as days that didn't exist, as if the non-existence was retroactive, as if the deletion was so complete that even the consequences of the deletion were deleted. But the consequences were real, and they were paid by real people. People who had no voice in the decision, no representation in the parliament that made it, no mechanism for recovering what was taken. They lost time. They lost money. They lost the orientation of their daily lives. And they were told it was for their own good, that the correction was necessary, that the old system was broken and the new system was better, that the 11 days had never really existed anyway because the calendar had been wrong. And now it was right, and anyone who objected was clinging to ignorance. The deeper I went, the more 1752 looked like a template for how power restructures reality and then tells the people inside that reality that nothing has changed. Because the rhetoric around the Calendar Act is identical to the rhetoric around every major institutional restructuring I've investigated. The old system is broken, the new system is correct, the transition is necessary, the costs are temporary, the benefits are universal, and the people who bear the costs are told that their discomfort is a sign of their own backwardness, not a sign of the injustice of the transition. And here's the thread that connects 1752 to everything else. The deletion of 11 days wasn't the first time authority deleted time. It wasn't the last. When the Gregorian calendar was adopted in 1582, Catholic countries deleted 10 days. When Russia adopted the Gregorian calendar in 1918, it deleted 13 days. When Greece adopted it in 1923, it deleted 13 days. Each transition deleted a different number of days because each country had waited a different length of time before capitulating. Each transition produced the same pattern. The authority decided, the people adjusted. The lost days were treated as if they had never existed. The cost fell downward. The benefit flowed upward. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision. Time is adjusted. Reality is restructured. The people inside the restructured reality are told that this is how it always was, that the correction is the truth and the previous experience was the error, that the 11 days you remember living through didn't actually happen because a parliament you didn't elect passed a law you didn't read. I'm not telling you the Gregorian calendar is wrong. It's a more accurate measurement of the solar year than the Julian calendar. The astronomical correction was legitimate. The math is sound. I'm asking something different. I'm asking what it means that a government can delete 11 days from the lived experience of millions of people and have it treated as a footnote. I'm asking what it means that the financial consequences of that deletion were borne entirely by the people who had no voice in the decision. I'm asking why the British tax year still begins on April 6th and nobody knows why. I'm asking what it does to a population across generations to live inside a system of time that was restructured to serve commercial interests and to internalize that restructured time as natural, as inevitable as the way things have always been. I'm asking what it means to delete time. Not metaphorically, actually. To reach into the calendar and remove days as if they were errors in a ledger rather than days that people lived, worked, loved, and died within. To treat human experience as subordinate to mathematical correction. To tell millions of people that the time they experienced was wrong. Because if they can delete 11 days and have it forgotten within a generation, what else have they adjusted that we no longer remember was different? Handed a calendar and told it was the only calendar there ever was. What else have we been handed and never thought to question?